I'm ready. We'll call the meeting to order. It's a meeting of January 18th. We're going to note that Commissioner Oltmans is absent. All other commissioners are here. Are there any changes to the order of business?
I'll move we approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion carries. We're going to move to tab 4, the non-timetable agenda. And the first item there is the water vendor. And Mr. Colling, are you introducing this item?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. The ordinance before you is on for second reading and final passage. This is the ordinance that pertains to private entities operating a water vendor. What the ordinance does is establish a permit system where anyone who would want to operate a bulk water vendor would need to obtain a permit from the city, and then the city would charge water out at the water vendor rate. One of the items on your agenda is a resolution to the fee schedule, which increases the water vendor rate from $15 per thousand to $16.50 per thousand. If you enact this ordinance, though, it would require anyone operating a bulk water vendor to obtain a permit from City Hall before doing so.
Thank you, Mr. Colling. I'm surprised you didn't notice that I skipped the consent agenda.
I did.
So,
The president of the commission is always at the in command of the agenda.
well, good answer, but let's go back and cover the consent agenda. You made a great introduction on the water vendor, but are there any, and we'll also note that Commissioner Oltmans did join the meeting, so are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss? Hearing none, is there a motion regarding the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda as is.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Landblum?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Now we move to 4A. You've heard the introduction of the ordinance number 1394 regarding the water vendor. I'll ask if there's anybody from the public that would wish to comment regarding this ordinance. If so, you can step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Anybody from the audience? There's no one from the audience, then any comments from other city staff or commissioners?
President Johnson, I just have one comment, if I may. One of the items that may not be addressed in the ordinance that you found as you read it is that the resale of water, once it's been purchased from the city, is not included, and that is something that we do want to limit, and that would be a condition of permit approval, would be that any entity that we grant a permit to would not be able to resell the water once purchased. So it's an important factor and one that I wanted to make sure that the commission was aware that we didn't miss that or skip that. We just thought it would be a condition of permit rather than put it in the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel.
Are we experiencing situations that it's being violated now?
Not to our knowledge, there's no violations, but it certainly is something in the future that we want to have the ability to restrict. So if there was a violation after they've obtained a permit, we could then take the permit back or revoke the permit if we found a violation.
Other comments? Any other comments or questions? Okay, this would be a second reading and final passage. Are you ready to move a motion at this time?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
move to approve second reading and final for ordinance number 1394.
I have a question. I just seen on the agenda, it says ordinance 1402. On the printed copy, it's 1394. Which is it?
1394.
It is 1394, okay. So with the motion to approve second reading and final passage of ordinance number 1394, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion second. Further discussion? Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Lamblum? Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. That brings us then to the fee schedule resolution. And Mr. Kessel, is that your introduction?
I believe Attorney Colling's going to take that
So
one.
you're going to take that one also? Okay, Mr. Coley?
Mr. President, the resolution before you establishes two different rates for a bulk water vendor. Currently, the city fee schedule sets the bulk water vendor rate at $15 per thousand. This resolution would bifurcate that. The rate would be $5 per thousand for the first 25,000 gallons in any 30-day period, and $16.50 per thousand for any gallons above 25,000. The thought process behind this is we have some users of the bulk water vendor who are agricultural customers who have used the city's bulk water vendor for some period of time, and we do not want to negatively impact them. So it was determined that a usage rate under 25,000 gallons in a 30-day period would be sufficient to meet their needs, but still capture those water users who are using well in excess of 25,000 gallons per month.
Okay. You've heard the introduction. Is this resolution number 012011?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you've heard the introduction. Comments, questions?
You know, am I reading more into this than I should when we say water vendor? That suggests to me that this rate would only apply to somebody who's turning around and selling that water again, as opposed to a water user.
The ordinance that was just approved defines a bulk water vendor as anyone who is using
Okay.
that water for filling trucks for industrial or commercial purposes.
All right.
So it's intended to apply both to the city's water vendor as well as any private companies who would be operating their own.
Okay.
When we discussed this matter last fall, it was the indication that we'd take a look at those rates. I thought at that time the proposed rates were low, and I see that we've raised them just a bit, but can you tell us, Mr. Kessel, as how you came around to justify the existing rate at $16.50?
Certainly, Commissioner Lamblum, a phone call to Watford City, who operates their own water vendor, indicated that they are moving their rate from $15 to $16.50. They did that as of January 1st of this year. They also indicated that the city of Stanley operates a water vendor. Their rate is substantially higher, more in that $30 range, and then the facility at Dodge, as I understand it, charges a little over $20. So certainly at $16.50, that is a rate that's in the market. It's at the low end of the market, but nevertheless, it is a market-based rate. One of the things that we hope to do when our solid waste facility, our wastewater facility is upgraded, is to use some of that water to sell to the industry. And I don't believe that the rate that we would charge at that time would be the full $16.50. It might be a lower rate than that, but that's why we established the $16.50 rate. It's based on those phone calls to other cities.
Mr. President, if I were to think out loud, based on the discussion that I portrayed back last fall, I still think that we might want to consider the $22 to $25 rate as opposed to what's being proposed now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Landblum. Mr. Kessel, you...
Yeah, if I may, one other thing that I should mention, Southwest Water Authority is interested in also building a water vendor in or around the city of Dickinson. They've not made a final decision yet on if they are going to do so or what that rate will be, but it is something to keep in mind as you move forward and make your decision.
You're inferring then that there may be a competitor for the sale of water?
Correct. And that would be untreated water, so it would have a competitive advantage from a pricing perspective as well.
Does the industry's menu require a certain quality of water for fracking?
Commissioner Lamboom, it does. One of we've had our water tested, our solid wastewater, and one of the issues that we have to deal with is sulfates. It's a little bit high in sulfates, and the industry has said that that's something that concerns them. The sulfate numbers that are in the raw water that Southwest Water delivers is under the sulfate number that the industry requires.
You're saying then that when we treat the water, we add sulfates or sulfur to the treatment cycle that as a consequence increases the sulfates?
No, I'm suggesting that once the water is used by our residents and our businesses, that there's sulfates added at that stage. And then once we receive it at the wastewater treatment plant.
Are we talking about two different things here? You're talking about wastewater as opposed to bulk water?
I'm suggesting that there are, the industry itself looks at certain parameters of water when they get it. And one of the things that they look at is sulfates. And if we get to the point where we can sell our wastewater to the industry, we're going to have to deal with the sulfate problem. The Southwest water that they're proposing to use does not have a sulfate problem. So they have a competitive advantage from the fact that it's raw and they don't have to treat it. They don't have to treat the sulfates because of it.
And for clarification for the public, are we presently selling Southwest Water through our infrastructure?
Yes, we are.
So then you're proposing or projecting that maybe there'll be a blending taking place down the road?
We certainly are proposing and hope that we can work with Southwest Water to provide a water vendor that is outside of our current downtown area where it is today, so that the impact on our infrastructure will be less. But at this point, we don't have an agreement with Southwest Water, so I'm not sure where that vendor could go.
Thank you.
Any other comments? One of the things I'm hopeful of here is if we can sell a significant amount of water through our water vendor at the $16.50 price or a price even higher, I think, one of the possibilities with that revenue is to direct it towards paying for our wastewater treatment facility project, or at least paying a portion of it. So, I would hope that Southwest Water Authority would think about that too, because it's a way for us, in a sense, to get some oil impact money in here and help pay for some of those impacts. Any other comments? Is there a motion regarding this resolution?
I'll
Mr.
move.
President,
Mr. Steiner?
move to approve resolution number 01-2011.
And I'll second.
We have the motion, the second. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I like the concept, but I still disagree with the value that we placed on it. However, I'll vote for it just to make sure that, the process gets underway. I would, though, request that we revisit that rate structure 6 months from now to see if the fee actually stands up to where we need to be or want to be.
Well, I think, I think our expectations should be that whether it's 1 month from now or 6 months from now, that Mr. Kessel and city staff just stay on top of what the market is out there, and if we need to make some adjustments, I think it's as easy as another resolution to adjust. So I would hope that this would be something they would kind of continually monitor, both demand and market price. Other comments? Not, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Lamblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. It's 5:30. We have a timetable agenda item set for 4:30, and that's to welcome 2 new police officers and Captain Dossinger. Do I have the original oaths of office here?
You do, I believe.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, Mr. President, members of this commission. At this time, I'd like to introduce our 2 newest officers in the community and the commission, Lauren Aschheim and Jaden Peters. Lauren is from Moorhead, and Jaden is from right here in Dickinson. Both started with us on January 3rd and are currently going through the FTO program.
Okay, would you please, got to raise your right hand first, and then we'll sign. I, state your name,
Lauren Asham.
and you can do it together.
Okay. All right. Hi, Jaden Peters.
Will support, obey, and defend
Will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the state of North Dakota,
the state of North Dakota,
and the city of Dickinson,
and the city of Dickinson,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
and I will strive always
and I will strive always
to meet the highest ethical standards
to meet the highest ethical standards
implicit in my employment
implicit in my employment
and in furtherance of the best public interest.
and in furtherance of the best public interest.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And welcome to the city of Dickinson.
Thank you.
Can I have you both to sign?
It's a 30-year contract they're signing, isn't it?
And then if you wouldn't mind just saying a few words for yourself.
All right. Well, my name's Jaden Peters. Know a few of you up there pretty well. I'm originally from Dickinson here. I was born and raised. Well, I guess I chose this career to serve my community. I mean, this town's given me everything I've got, and this is my best way of paying back to a community that's given me a lot. Have a lot of friends and family here still, and really excited to be here.
Well, welcome back. Or you never left.
For a little bit, but I'm
Okay.
back, so.
My name's Lauren Asham. I was born and raised in Moorhead and graduated from college there. I had a BA in criminal justice. I went on to go to the Alexandria, Minnesota Law Enforcement Academy, and after that I worked for about 2 years at the jail there. And I saw that you guys had an opening, so I gave it a whirl, and seems to be going so good so far, so I'm kind of excited and hope to do the best that I can.
Welcome. Had you ever been out to western North Dakota prior to applying for a job here?
I've traveled through a couple times, but when I came to Dickinson the first time, I was pretty impressed with the kind of hometown feel you guys got going versus, say, Fargo. You guys are a little bit friendlier, if I might say. So I'm kind of enjoying that.
So we're friendlier than Fargo.
I think so, a little bit.
Headline.
Headlines. Probably better looking too, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Good. Well, we're pleased that you're both here. Any comments or questions here by commissioners?
If I may, Ms. Asham, as an alum of Moorhead State, and I'm dating myself calling it that because I know they've changed their name since then.
Right,
The
yes.
standards are high for you. The expectations are going to be.
I'll keep that in mind.
Actually, we haven't had that good luck with that school up to this point, so we're hoping you can change that. So.
No pressure though, right?
You didn't do any tri-college when you were there, did you?
No.
Oh, excellent, good choice.
Easy enough.
Okay. Well, welcome again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're going to go back to the general issues then, tab 4A, and we have item C, and that's a right burial resolution. And I suppose, Mr. Colling, you're introducing this one also.
Yes, Mr. President and Commissioners, the resolution before you is a resolution for the city to reacquire several burial lots. This comes to us at the request of one of our citizens who wanted to purchase this lot. Pursuant to state law, there's a procedure where the city can attempt to contact the person who is recorded as the owner of these lots, publish a notice that the person needs to express an interest in those lots, or the city will reacquire them. The information that we have on these lots, we have a name, but it appears that the person may have been buried elsewhere and is no longer in need of these lots. So what we will do if you pass this resolution is attempt to contact the person. We suspect that the person is no longer living, but we will publish a copy of this resolution, and then if 60 days pass and nobody expresses an interest in those lots, they will revert back to the city and be available for the public to purchase at that time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Colling. I'm sure you remember the presentation a couple of meetings ago by the citizen. Do you have any comments or questions regarding this resolution or this process? Would there be a motion then pertaining to the resolution?
I'd make that motion.
Is that to approve?
To approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Lamblom?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to tab 5, Public Safety, and Chief Seevock will give the fire department report.
Good evening, President Johnson and Commissioners. You'll see in the December report, we responded to 25 incidents. 2 of those were the building fires, the church fires. In addition to that report, however, I'd like to draw your attention to the information that we've included outlining a training that we were able to host in December. Wild Well Control Incorporated was able to come to our department and put a training on for us, 6-hour classroom presentation. We were very fortunate to find out about this training through the Minot Fire Department, who hosted the same training in their location. And we were able to bring that to our department and to neighboring departments that took part at no cost. It was part of a community outreach program that the Wild Well Company had in place through 2010, and it ended at the end of 2010. So that was a very valuable training that we had concerning activities that are going on in and around our city with oil well response, tank battery storage response, so on and so forth. One of the, if not the most important thing that we learned from this training, the most important message, is the same type of message that we put forth when we do our trainings at our training facility that are based on oil field safety. Sometimes, depending on what's going on, the best course of action that a fire department can recognize to do is secure a perimeter and do nothing else. That was a very important message to hear reinforced again. Along with that, I would like to also mention that we received another donation towards our radio project, this time from United Way. It was a designated gift through United Way from Marathon Oil Corporation, $2,500. So to date, we've received $3,000 worth of donations from Marathon, $2,000 from the Bison Pipeline Project, so $5,000 worth of donations to help us with our radio transition program, which is currently in process. We're just about done with that, and we hope to be done with that by the end of the month. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any comments or questions for the Chief?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Then Captain Dossinger will give the police department report. So welcome, Captain.
Did we buy another one?
What's that?
I asked if we bought another one.
No, different look, though. December, we've seen 142 traffic accidents. 36 of those accidents were hit-and-run accidents, and 7 of those were injury-related. We also conducted 166 traffic stops during the month of December.
Captain Dossinger, would those numbers be considered kind of on par with a typical December?
As far as accidents,
Accidents or traffic stops, injury-related accidents? I mean, would this be pretty much a normal December that we're looking at?
that's correct. We usually average, as far as injury-related accidents, we usually see anywhere from 6 to 8 injury-related accidents a
Okay.
month. So we are on average with that. As far as total accidents, you can see by this chart, we had a total of 851 crashes in 2010. The most we've seen was in December with 142, and the least was in July, which had 42 crashes. You can kind of tell how weather definitely affects our crash ratio throughout the year.
Now, I think we all feel that there's more traffic within the community. Are these numbers higher than 2009 then?
They are slightly higher. There's not a big significance there.
Okay.
I think the last couple months of winter are definitely raising those numbers. And, last January 2010, we see 90 crashes. We're definitely going to exceed that number this year. From December 28th through January 13th, we've been targeting red light violations on 3rd Avenue West, especially the intersections north of 12th Street. For those 17 days, with that enforcement effort, we wrote 26 citations and 2 warnings. So we want to encourage the public out there to exercise caution when they're approaching these intersections and make sure that they obey the traffic control devices. That's a significant reason why our accidents are up. People need to obey the traffic control devices and stop signs in our community.
Since you're talking about that, this is for Mr. Shoren at the same time, is there any indication that we're going to get a turn signal on 21st and Highway 22 put in shortly?
I think that's a question more directed for Mr. Soren.
That is part of the Highway 22 project that is coming up, I believe, in 2012. It's supposed to be bid at the end of this year in 2012 construction. It does have signal improvements, actually 15th all the way up to 23rd Walmart.
But can we afford to wait that long? With the number of citations, the number of accidents that are taking place up in that particular corner. I was wondering, I realize you got to do warrants and everything else, but, and wait on the state, but I wonder if the state is not kind of dragging their heels with their process when we have an immediate, it looks like an immediate need to have at least a left turn lane signal in that area.
We can certainly pursue that. I don't know what the citations or violations that are there currently, but we can certainly, we've done the legwork and got DOT's approval to do it. They've got it scheduled, so we can certainly push it and see if we can get it moved up. If that
It just seems like a simple solution to kind of a major problem or a creeping problem that we're having in that area on that, on that radar base or the 21st and 3rd Avenue. If there's some way that I can encourage this, the engineering department or the state to step up their change, because it looks like it's just a change in electronics or electrical system and putting up a different light system. Thank you.
Calls for service in December, we were one shy of 1,000 calls for service in December. We ended the year with 18,159 calls for service, which is fairly comparable to what we've seen in 2009. The number you see in parentheses is a number of arrests that we had in November. In December, we had 15 vandalism calls. Last November, we had 16 vandalism calls. Everything is fairly similar until you get down to the simple assault calls. We did have 7 simple assault arrests in December. One thing that contributed to that is we are seeing an increase in bar fight calls. That has definitely been up in the month of December. Domestic violence calls were up slightly. We had 5 or 8 arrests in December for domestic violence assaults. Everything else is pretty much on par compared to what it was last month. We did have 6 drug-related calls again, and we also did have 1 motor vehicle theft call. We had 4 burglaries compared to 6 in November, and we did see a huge drop in theft calls from last month, which is what we like to see. We did respond to 46 alarm calls. Those are your commercial, residential, your panic alarms that we see in banks, other businesses, and individuals that have residential alarms in their homes that we respond to. School zones, we had a total of 22 school zone contacts in December. 11 of those were citations, 9 were parking tickets that were issued, and 2 of those were written warnings. December training, Sergeant Pete Selly and Officer DJ Wallace attended the Methods of Instruction School. That is a class that's prerequisite for them to do law enforcement training, which is post-certified. That allows them to do in-house training within our department. That was in Bismarck, and it was for 4 days. During the month of December, the Southwest Tactical Team did have 2 call-out missions. The first one was on December 4th, where the team responded to a mutual aid request from the Adams County Sheriff's Department. This was concerning an armed barricade subject that discharged a firearm several times in a residence during a domestic altercation. The team took the subject into custody following a covert entry. Because our team is a regional response team, we do receive those requests. That request came at the state level, and all the man hours that went into that were reimbursed. Our salaries were reimbursed for that. The other incident was on December 6th here in Dickinson. The team responded to a call regarding a subject that had discharged a firearm when officers approached a home concerning a domestic-related call. The team conducted a dynamic entry at that time, and they did find the subject had died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Training events for the tactical team. On December 3rd, they had conducted live firearm training concerning a subject hostage resolution. On the 9th, our marksman observer team did go out and conduct some long-range shooting at our local outdoor range. And on the 15th, scenario training regarding a domestic-related armed barricade hostage situation was conducted. And on December 29th, the team conducted operational training and conducted debriefings on the December callouts. Staffing, we currently have 4 new officers going through the field training program, 2 of which you met here tonight. Currently, we are advertising for a police officer position to fill our last spot. We were granted the 30th position in the month of January, and we are trying to fill that now. And we also did fill our dispatcher spot in the month of December. Are there any questions?
Any questions or comments for the captain? I appreciate the report.
Thank you.
We'll move to tab 6, Public Works Engineering, and we're going to turn this over to Mr. Soren.
Thank you, President Johnson. City Commissioners, the first item we have is the the second reading of the rezoning of the Porter Second Subdivision. The current zoning for this subdivision is general commercial. They have requested a rezoning from general commercial to limited industrial for Block 1, Lots 2 and 4, and from general commercial to general industrial for Blocks 1, Lot 3, and Block 2, Lots 1 through 4. This has been through planning and zoning, and this is what they're recommending to the City Commission for approval. The one difference between this and the original request was Block 1, Lots 2 and 4 was originally requested to be changed from general commercial to general industrial. Because of neighboring properties and how that adjoined, they felt the staging of that to a limited industrial first was more appropriate. So that's where the change came, and is recommending that change to the City Commission. And with that, we're recommending approval of the second and final reading of the rezoning request.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Soren. Again, on the agenda, it listed as ordinance 1406. Here it's 1460.
1406 is correct. It's,
1406 is
misprint on your
correct,
copy.
okay. So at this time, I'll just ask if there's anyone from the general public that would like to comment regarding this proposed ordinance. If you'd like to do that, just step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Is there anybody from the public? There's no one from the public that would like to comment. Any comments or questions by other city staff or city commissioners?
Mr. President, I'll move for second reading and final passage of 1406, ordinance 1406.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Lamblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Soren, would you like to continue?
The next item, we did receive another request for impact funds. This one comes from Gary Bullinger for Prairie Oak Drive. Last year, you may recall, he had requested impact fees for the south portion of this street. And this proposed project starts at the end of that project that was approved last year. This will continue Prairie Oak Drive up to 12th Avenue West with water, sewer, and street construction. You'll also notice on the map, there's the street with the cul-de-sac on the end. It would include water and sewer for that as well. One of the things I'd like to point out with this project, one of the plats that we're reviewing tomorrow at Planning and Zoning is directly to the north of this and does require the sewer and water at the intersection of Prairie Oak Drive and 12th Avenue. So this project does tie together and allow the future growth to the north with the project that is being proposed and going to be presented at Planning and Zoning tomorrow. The project cost is estimated at $630,000. It is a residential project, which does make it eligible for 50% up to $300,000. And with that, the developer is the owner of all the lots that are involved in this impact area. And with that, I guess I'd recommend approval of the development impact fees for this project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Soren. You've heard his introduction. Any comments, questions by commissioners here?
I expect that this project doesn't take us close to the maximum we have allocated for R1 for residential.
No, currently
Impact fees.
it doesn't. When we made the change to the 4 million, that dropped us back down. We will be bringing those numbers to you. I do have about 5 additional projects that people are working on, and if all those come at one time, we will definitely be at that max.
This may be digressing a little bit, but I expect we have a number of impact fee projects that are at various stages of completion right now. I don't know how many there would be. My question is, are any of those that we've previously approved totally inactive? Are there any that the developer has not really turned a wheel, design-wise or bidding? In other words, are those projects we've approved all progressing in one way or another?
I think there's only one that we approved. The contractors, or the developer started design and walked away from it. We had paid for some of those services, and they paid those off already, and didn't take the project any farther once they got the costs for it. Other than that, I believe the rest of them are all in process.
When you mention you'll be bringing the numbers to us, do you mean a schedule of what we've approved and then what's pending out there?
Yeah, try and get the actual numbers, payoffs again, where we're at and how that's going. I'm working with Ms. Johnson to ensure that we get those accurate numbers and try and keep that coming forward for you, so we can continue to track that directly.
Yeah, this is, you and Mr. Jackson were discussing, if a number of these come at the same time, it could cause a cash flow issue for us.
I expect you're seeing some jockeying for this money. I expect you're seeing some urgency.
I think we're going to start seeing developers bringing 3 projects for a subdivision together, separate, so they can maximize the amount of impact funds available. I've got one right now that they're talking about possibly 3 different projects within the same development, but setting them up and trying bidding them all together. So I think there's going to be some things like that that we're going to have to discuss how we handle that as we move forward. But yes, there is an urgency amongst the developers to try and get their name in the hat, so to speak, first, to try and make sure they're eligible for funds.
Other comments or questions?
When did we approve the first phase of Country Oaks? Was it last fall here?
Yeah, it was last fall. I'm not sure the exact.
Do you have any indication as to percentage of completion for the development of that first phase?
His engineer's here, we could certainly ask him. I know they've got some underground stuff in. Do you have an idea of the percentage of completion?
Mr. Smith, could you come to the podium so we can get you recorded?
Jeremy.
Come up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was the other engineer.
I think on Phase 1 construction, I'd say the percentage is probably in the range of 30%, 20 to 30% of Phase 1 is complete. I guess we kind of got hamstrung by the weather a little bit this fall. If the weather would have cooperated a little bit more, we would have had probably closer to 50% or more, but we just kind of got hamstrung by the weather. But right now, it's probably 20 to 30% completion.
We're talking just of the infrastructure itself?
Right, right.
What's your sense of demand for the lots? Are you experiencing pretty good demand for these lots, or is it too early?
Well, I'm not the owner, obviously, but
Right.
my sense is that that's why the owner submitted to Phase 2, because he's seeing a need for Phase 1 and quite a bit of interest in those lots for Phase 1. And Phase 2 is just obviously just a continuation of that Phase 1.
Okay.
So I think there is significant interest for those lots.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. President, I think this leads back to where Mr. Jackson and Mr. Shorman were just discussing about the number of applicants that are out there and the phasing process that each of them are starting to look at. And it's going to be a quagmire as we look at these things as to how much they're going to be able to fill in and actually accomplish, and we're going to have a bunch of empty lots sitting out there in midst of a number of different developments.
Well,
I'm not sure how you answer that problem, but,
well, Mr. Lamel, I'm not sensing that that we're in danger of overdeveloping at this point where we're going to have empty lots is really, I think it might be the other way around, that we could possibly be faced with a situation where the impact, the future impact is going to be greater than what we have been experiencing. I guess the intensity of it, I just, in the last couple of weeks, been just hearing more stories about leasing activity to the south of us, fairly significant leasing activity. And if that's the case, they're going to drill wells there, and if they find oil to the south of us, I think the impact here is going to be quite a bit more intense than what we've already experienced. So at this point, I don't think we're going to be faced with a bunch of empty lots.
Well, the other part of the picture, though, is going to be that we might have to expand that impact fund, even though we just did it here not too many months ago, just to be able to accommodate.
That's true. I think we could be faced with that, and that's, again, why I think it's so important that in this legislative session that an oil hub city such as Dickinson receives a fair amount of money. The past biennium, or the current biennium that we're in, we've received, I think it's a total of $1 million in impact funds. Might be a little more than that, because I think it was $1 million in special funds plus then our formula funds. And that was very much appreciated, but that's not going to be anywhere close to what we're going to need here on a go-forward basis. Just the funding of this impact development program alone could easily take $5, $6, $7 million in this coming 2 years. Now, that's money we all hope to get back, that the oil industry will be here for quite some time, but it is upfront money on the part of the city. And, we have the wherewithal to upfront a little bit of this or a smaller percentage of this on our own, but we don't have the wherewithal to upfront $7 million.
Are you going to be giving us some kind of a written compilation of the various impact fee projects? You were talking about you're going to bring us in a status report on the impact fee projects?
Right. The idea was to bring in which projects we've approved, how much actually was spent for each of those versus what we've approved, and if they're done or if they're still
Sure.
active, that type of a scenario.
It wouldn't take much in that report, or however you're going to do that, to show us the number of lots in each project, would it?
No, we already have that as well.
I think that would be interesting to track that as we're doing this. Give us a sense for...
Yeah. Will we be, in that report, are we also going to be able to see what specials have already been paid back against each one of those? That would be pretty important to have. I mean,
Would.
somehow that information is coming in because, we're receiving it in a lump sum. I don't know if we can tie it back to each development, but
I think we can figure out how much we've got back. The question would be
from
what we got back for each project.
Right.
But
whether we
somehow,
can do that.
but somehow you should be able to cash flow it so we can see what monies are coming back so that we can reappropriate that money so that we know what the cycle is, right?
Yes, we can get that, so we'll know how much we got back on those specials. I just don't know if we'll know, based on the project, how much each project got back.
Okay.
But if we specialed, $2 million and we received 400,000 back.
And for the residential specials, they're spread over a 10-year period, and the commercial and industrials are a 5-year period.
I believe that's correct, yes.
So, but each owner has they can pay the whole thing off up front if they want, and we probably have experienced some of that, too.
I think we've experienced where they've paid some off. We've experienced where they've set how much is going to be special, and they've come in and paid the difference. Like, if they said $5,000, they come pay $3,500. So the buyer knows exactly how much is going to be special,
Right.
and then they've let it go to full specials.
Okay, good discussion. Other comments?
Is there a timing factor when these specials are due? Are they due once a year, or they come in throughout the year?
I think they're handled just right with the real estate property taxes.
So basically, it's once a year, and it goes to the county and back to the city? And so we do have, during the course of the year, a timing factor on that, too, then we have to consider, or be concerned about.
I suspect they can be paid back with the same timing that options that you have in terms of your property taxes. So I would assume we get the bulk of them in the first quarter. But
Our timing issue comes from when we're trying to get the assessment done. They've got to be certified, for projects this summer, have to be certified to the county by October so they can get assessed. If we miss October, then it's a full year before the assessment goes on.
So it's really kind of a hindrance to the developer as well as the city then for timing on allocating the money and also getting it back.
Well, it would be more of a burden to the city,
Mm.
timing-wise, because in effect, what it is, it's a loan from the city to, eventually to the property owners, and if it misses that October date, then it's another year before we start collecting our money.
Correct.
In other words, the city has to pay the construction bill regardless. Mr. President, I'll move to approve the Country Oaks Estates Second Edition Impact Fee Project.
Okay, we have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion? No other discussion, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Landblum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Soren, would you like to continue?
It's under the reports. I do have several sets of minutes. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those. I'm not going to go through them specifically. Planning and zoning does show some of the sketch plats and things that we're working on, which is the Cook subdivision is one of them, which is north of the Country Oaks that we just talked about. There is a replat of North Industries that we're working on because of some developer or purchasers want different size lots. Not a major change, but there's some things like that are going on right now, and we've got about 8 items on the agenda tomorrow. We do have the year-end code enforcement report in here for you. It does show that we had 141 single-family structures permitted last year, 70 multifamily for the year. Of those 70 multifamily, they account for 175 housing units, 41 commercial, which is up 15, 16 from last year, for a total new building permit value of $75 million to the community. If there's any questions with regards to that, I'd certainly try and answer those as well.
Do you have a sense yet for what 2011 is going to be like?
Based on a lot of the activity we're starting to see, talks of a couple of truck stops, another hotel, several people asking about apartment buildings and where they can build, I think we're going to be as busy as we were last year, if not busier. There's certainly a lot of talk going on right now, and it's pretty early in the year right now and a lot of snow on the ground, so, and there's people talking about trying to start moving it to get in the ground.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for the city engineer? All right. We'll move to tab 8, then City Administrator's Report.
Thank you, President Johnson and Commissioners. First of all, I'd like to just give a brief recycling update. The committee has been working diligently to try and provide recycling options to the residents of Dickinson and the greater Southwest area. They're currently working on a project. They've identified sites, various sites around our community, about 4 of them that will be drop-off sites to facilitate optional recycling of especially 3 products that the city recycles, that being yard waste, used oil, and cardboard. But in addition to those 3 things that the city recycles specifically, we'd extend invitations to other entities that are currently responsible for collecting aluminum cans, plastic goods, and the others of the like. The hope being that we'll have kind of a one-stop drop-off center for all recycling products, and then each of those entities would be responsible for collecting the material that they are that they receive at that site, cleaning them out, and then selling it or disposing of it in the manner that they see fit. This does come as an expense. These sites would all be fenced, they'd be signed, and they'd also have security accoutrements attached to that. So we have applied for a grant. That grant was through the USDA. It would help us in the marketing and educating of people about these sites, about the value of recycling and reuse, and it would also take advantage of the greater market area. We operate a landfill that accepts material from a much broader area than just the city of Dickinson. We have approximately 24 different communities that bring their waste into the city of Dickinson's landfill, and any way that we can lower that waste stream and therefore lengthen the amount of time that landfill is available to us is obviously an advantage. I would like to thank Jared Andrus for helping the city make the application for that grant. It is currently being scored at the federal level. It is a competitive grant. We hope to hear within the next 60 days whether or not we'll receive that grant. We'll certainly keep the commission posted. The other thing that I'd like to mention is, as we've moved forward, a new fledgling business is in our midst, and they would like to begin a recycling center here in Dickinson. Their ideas and thoughts are to operate a facility that will do single-source recycling, which means they'll issue a canister to all the residents of Dickinson in phases. They can then, each resident fills that container with all recyclable goods. It's picked up curbside, and then they will sort all of those materials and then recycle those to the appropriate markets as they are around. So that was exciting news. We're encouraging, obviously, a entrepreneur to do that, and we're working closely with them as the recycling becomes more prominent. With that, I guess I'll try and take any questions that we may have, and of course, Commissioner Jackson is the chair of our committee, so he may have further comments.
Mr. Kessel, is it fair to say that the expansion of these collection sites that we're talking about really has nothing to do with the grant application, nor does it have, it's not contingent on a recycling center and entrepreneurial endeavor?
That'd be correct, Commissioner Jackson. The sites themselves, although mentioned in the grant, they don't pay for that kind of infrastructure. What they will help reimburse is dollars related to the marketing and training effort that it would take to make everybody aware of these efforts.
So our expenditure, the city's expenditures moving forward on these sites will be the fencing you've talked about, but probably some containers as well.
Correct. It'd be site prep work, making sure the sites are level. It'd be, fencing, putting up permanent or temporary fencing, purchasing all the containers for the types of product that we would be recycling, and then making sure that there's space, of course, for anybody else who'd like to partner with us on those sites.
Okay, I know we've talked at the committee meetings about how we would pay for those improvements to those 4 or 5 sites. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Certainly. The state of North Dakota mandated a charge to all residences when it came to, there was a recycling fee that we had to collect. We did so. There is a balance in that account of about $385,000. There are some expenses that are going to be removed from that account, so the estimated balance is going to be north of $300,000. The expected expenses of creating these sites should be south of $300,000. So in other words, we have the money on hand in order to make those sites happen, whether or not a grant is successful.
So I assume that's something that you'll be coming to the commission with a formal request for approval of those expenditures?
You should get that request probably within the next 40 days, I would guess, the next probably 3 meetings. There should be a request before this body to formally establish those sites and the expenses that we expect to incur.
Just to expand on this education campaign or public relations campaign, whatever you want to call it, I think the committee thinks that's really important to get that word out to our citizens. I get more comments about recycling than I do snow removal, believe it or not. I get comments all the time about recycling. There are a lot of people that are really waiting to be able to do this. This will be strictly a voluntary thing, and it won't be a perfect situation, but it's something that I sure think we should proceed with this spring as soon as we can. There are a lot of other things being talked about, promoting some different kind of collection for yard waste and things like that, but right now, everything voluntary. So I look forward to seeing that request so we can move on.
If there's no other questions, I'll move on to item number 2, which is a comprehensive transportation plan. The City of Dickinson also applied for a grant to defray expenses related to the creation of a comprehensive/transportation plan. Our current plan was established in 1982, so it is outdated and does need to be redone. The grant application was to the Department of Transportation, the North Dakota DOT. The grant amount that was awarded was $250,000. We are very excited about this grant. It does mean that the state will be our partner. The project itself will be managed and owned by the City of Dickinson, so we are putting together the request for proposal. We do have examples of RFPs from other cities who have done similar comprehensive plans, and so we're using those to draft our own RFP. We hope to issue that RFP within the next few months, and if you remember, this is a budgeted item in our 2011 budget, so there is a match, and we'll obviously keep you updated because this is something that's going to take a great deal of effort on behalf of the commission, the staff, and also we'll have a lot of resident meetings where we will hear the opinions, the thoughts of the residents on how the City of Dickinson should move forward in a great many areas. So we're excited about that. And kind of tangential to this, we are at the interview stage for the planner position, and obviously would like to have somebody on board as quickly as possible so that they can help guide us through this process. Any questions about that topic?
Did I hear you say we'd be issuing the RFP in the next few months?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, next few weeks. If I said months, I didn't mean to say that. We actually hope by the end of this month or the first week of February that we could issue an RFP.
I think this is really an important activity.
If I said months, I apologize, I meant weeks. The next item then is Highway 22 improvements. As President Johnson mentioned earlier, we have a great many oil impacts that we are hoping that the state will help us fund. One of those priorities is Highway 22, as it moves north from our current city limits to the Dunn County line. We did hear from the DOT that this is a project that they are working on. We are excited about that project, and we actually will be meeting with them to make some suggestions regarding improvements. As of right now, they will add left turn lanes and offset right turn lanes, bypass lanes, and controlled access. What that means is they're looking at establishing essentially a two-lane street that will have, when a right turn is expected, they'll add a middle lane, so to speak. If you're, yeah, that's right. So they'll add a middle lane so that it won't impede traffic. The lane will be, you can use that lane to make your turn, and others can go around you as you're moving forward. We're hoping Engineer Soren and I can get together with the DOT engineer, the regional engineer, and talk further about those improvements. We don't know a lot about them yet, other than it is a priority for them. This will be a 2011 project, by the way, for them. So the construction could happen, I hate to say 2011, but it's possible. We have several other needs that we're going to be speaking to them about regarding transportation. That's obviously high on our list. And maybe 21st, the intersection at 21st and Highway 2 is one of those we can mention as well with that left turn lane. So, any questions regarding the Highway 22 extension improvements? If not, I do want to mention that I did at one other commission meeting. We have Southwest Night at the legislature is January 24th at the Ramcota. We do have a ticket, and would like to make sure that if any of you do plan to attend, we'd like to make sure that we can assist with making those arrangements. Ms. Binstock will help you do that to the best of her ability. And then there are a few things that Attorney Colling would like to review with the commission this evening.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, I just wanted to take a brief moment to update you on the annexation proceeding. As you know, a complaint was filed in district court contesting the annexation, filed on behalf of several of the landowners that were annexed to the city. We have now, on behalf of the city, responded to that complaint and to the motion that they made for an injunction to stop the annexation immediately while we litigate out the issues. That response has been filed on behalf of the city. From here, I anticipate that the court will set up a oral argument or a court hearing where we'll go in and present our case before the judge, and then receive the judge's ruling on the landowner's motion to enjoin the annexation and prevent that from proceeding. Once that hearing is set, I will let you know about that. I anticipate, it's going to depend on the court schedule, but I would anticipate sometime in February we would have that court hearing. The second matter that I wanted to bring to your attention has to do with the Armory project, the ongoing completion of that project. As I think we reported on several meetings ago, the truss supplier, the roof truss supplier, has not been paid on the project, or has indicated to us that they have not been paid. The city has paid the general contractor, Two Rivers Construction, in full for that work, but the truss supplier was apparently not paid by Two Rivers. Valley Truss has retained local counsel, and they have made a demand informally on the city to recover that money that they claim to have not been paid, and may bring a claim in court on that as well. Don't have any further information on that at this time, other than our response to Valley Truss several weeks ago was that under North Dakota law, they do not have a right to lien the property. They did execute a lien waiver indicating they had been paid. And also, since the city has paid out all the money to the general contractor, we believe the only claim that Valley Trust Company has is against the general contractor and not against the city, since the city is fully paid for that work. I do have one other matter, unless there are any questions on those. We did receive an indication from our building inspector, Mr. Zent, of a building that is possibly marked for condemnation was damaged in the explosion last year out in the West Industrial Park. Unfortunately, the building itself in the West Industrial Park as a whole is outside of the city limits, and under our code, it's not under the jurisdiction of the city in order to condemn that building and bring it down as a dangerous building. That is in county jurisdiction, and would be up to the county to initiate condemnation and removal proceedings if that becomes necessary. The West Industrial Park is within our extraterritorial zone, but pursuant to state law, the only provisions of our city code that extend within the ETZ are our zoning code and our subdivision approval code. The building code, which provides the authority for a governmental entity to condemn a building and bring it down as a dangerous structure, doesn't extend within the extraterritorial zone, so it would be up to the county to bring that proceeding if it does become necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Colling.
With respect to the last subject, are we passing that information on to the county and communicating with them about that?
We'll certainly be issuing a letter to the individual who contacted the city requesting our assistance, and we'll CC the county on that letter.
I think it'd be good as a courtesy to make sure they know what's going on.
Okay. Move to tab 9, that's City Commission, and we said we'd keep the snow removal, snow gates issue on the agenda, and I would ask if either Engineer Soren or Commissioner Oltmans have any updates or any other items there regarding this issue that they would like to communicate.
I have a couple of comments, I guess. I did, after the last meeting, visited with our street superintendent, Ed Kronk, and had him put some numbers together, looking at particularly hauling of snow. In his best estimate, he looked at if we could lease 2 loaders and 20 trucks for hauling. In addition to that, we would need to purchase 2 new loaders and a new snow blower, as well as 4 additional staff for ourselves to be able to conduct that operation and get it done within 6 days. You know, as I would point out that that's a best guess because every snow event's different, and the wind and things of that nature, but when you put all of that together for the equipment, you're looking at about $640,000. The 20 trucks and the 2 loaders, we're estimating that would, because we'd be running 24-hour shifts, about $53,000 a day is what that would cost. So an average snow event, we're looking at about $460,000 cost to the city. Like I said, that's kind of a best guess, trying to estimate a 4 or 5 inch snow, what it averages us to remove snow now when we haul it, and putting the numbers of equipment together. One of the unknown factors is even though there's 20 trucks available in the community, whether you could find 40 drivers to keep those trucks running 24 hours a day, that's kind of an unknown factor right now. Where we'd haul the snow to is another big question, because one of the concerns is if you were to lease land around town to haul the snow and dump it, it probably will make that land unfarmable. If the snow doesn't damage it with the sand and salts and things in there, certainly the rate the snow disappears in the spring is going to probably put them too late into a spring or summer from the piles for them to get a crop in for that year. We would anticipate that we'd need probably 3 70-acre tracts of land around town to be able to do that. So it's looking like it's a pretty expensive operation to try and accomplish that up front. Is it doable? I think with some of the resources around, we have some resources available to us. I think we could get some people on board and could do that. But like I said, we're looking at our estimate, about $460,000 an event, plus an upfront cost of $640 to get the additional equipment that we need. We also did some, on a side note to this, we did budget for a new plow this year, and as part of that, we had the suppliers bid that with a snow gate on it, just to get an idea of what the cost was. We anticipated the plow would cost us about $15,000. With the snow gate on it, it came in right under $24,000, which in turn is about $8,500 is what the snow gate added to the cost of that. There would be some additional equipment needed to connect it to the pieces of equipment. So I think that $10,000 to $15,000 range is probably a pretty good number that we're thinking per piece of equipment. And when we looked at that, I believe it was 12 pieces of equipment that we thought we needed to do that, to totally get our fleet up and running with snow gates. Some of that is contractors' equipment currently, but that is a more firm number that we did receive from one of the plow suppliers.
How many total pieces of equipment again would we have to do this for?
We figured 12.
12? So probably roughly $150,000 to outfit everybody for snow gates if the number is somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 per piece.
That's what we would
Yeah.
estimate. That's where we would start anyway if we did that, and see where we came in. Certainly, as you move forward, the unknown is how much they slow you down. We've heard anywhere from 30 to 50% loss in production. One of the unknowns there is currently we try and slow down, square up our plows to get across driveways. We may not have to do that, so it may not slow us down at all. It might actually, we may be able to keep going with that. But, yeah, currently that's what we think we'd need to do in order to pursue the snow gate option.
You know, I think if the cost, the upfront cost is, say, roughly $150,000, I think we could do that. If they would be effective and we'd get some benefit out of it, I think the dollar-wise, we could handle that. If we were looking at trying to haul all the snow away, when you're talking $640,000 in additional equipment and $460,000 a snow event, that might be quite a stretch for us. But
Sure. If you're looking at, 1 million versus 150,000, that is quite a difference. I see on 4th Avenue East, between 8th Street and Museum, you did go back through this last week and remove the snow. I was driving up the street and the plow was removing snow, and they did move it to the center and came back. Was that a test that the department was doing, or why that particular street?
No, I don't believe it was a test. Oftentimes, as you get going on some of our heavier traveled streets that we do push it out, when time allows, we will go back and clean up those narrow spots that come in. It's, even after a snow event, we may be 3 weeks later and we're still cleaning up sight distance problems that were created by things, or trying to widen streets, or as we can get to them. It's just, we've got to do them when we have time to do that. So I think that was part of our normal routine operation, is going back on a street that was getting narrow and is one of our main streets in town.
Okay.
It wouldn't probably be a typical residential street operation, but those more urban streets are,
The city has always done that, I think,
yes.
selected streets.
Okay. So what's your recommendation at this point? Anything?
Well, if I had to pick between the two, I think I'd certainly pick snow gates. Now, with that being said, I think snow gates have their purpose. I think there's a benefit on certain snow events that are there. The 5 inches seems to be a pretty typical number you hear whenever you talk to people. If it's 5 inches or less, they're really effective. Once you get over the 5 inches, then it starts spilling over and you know, they still help, but people still have the ridge. And, you know, some of the communities you talk to, they still get the same calls. You didn't use the snow gates because I still had to shovel this morning. It's like, well, if the ridge is bigger on either side of your driveway than it is in your driveway, it was used, it just didn't carry enough snow. So I think there's a benefit in that aspect. One of the things that does concern us as a staff, though, is when you've got driveways side by side and they're getting bigger, you may have one driveway cleared, it starts spilling in the next one before you can dump it, and then there's a mailbox. So you end up dumping the snow in front of a mailbox, and maybe the second driveway didn't get as clear as their neighbor. So then we'll hear those concerns that, you know, we weren't using it or weren't effective, and possibly having to go back and try and clear mailboxes for them. You know, so I think there's definite benefits there, but I think there's also things that can be caused because of it.
Sure, but right now you're affecting 100% of the people 100% of the time. Then you'd be affecting a smaller percentage of the time.
Mr. President, I have a different question. Mr. Soren, you've talked before about our growing usage of contractors to move snow and take care of that issue. We're also approving subdivision after subdivision. We're going to see growth, we know that. I suspect a year from now, we'll have an additional X miles of street that we'll be moving snow on. I can't imagine that we're not going to have to consider the purchase of more equipment, even with our current operation. Even if we make no changes to our current operation, there's going to be a point that
Well, you're going to have to look at staffing, too. You can't
And staff.
continue to do the same job with the same number of people that we've had for 15 and 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably, I guess, phase two of what we're looking at. You know, the first phase, we tried to get some numbers on the hauling, you know, down as quick as we could. We were in a snow event, so we had some challenges in sitting down and getting those numbers put together anyway. But we are looking at staffing and miles of road and where we're at with our current staff. And could we add some full-time and reduce some seasonal things and get the benefit year-round? And if we did that, could we maybe reduce some of the amount of contractors' help? Or could we be using contractors in a different way and be more consistent on our plowing? You know, that's one of the things we always have challenges with is we train our staff, and then every time you bring contractors, they got new ones, and you're sending someone around to try and help them understand the process that we're going through.
Is there a chance that we're going to be buying a new motor patrol in the next year or two to be taking care of this? You know, is that a possibility?
I think it's a possibility.
And what does that cost? Do you know offhand?
I wouldn't know.
They're not cheap. I just think we have to remember that, too. I think it's a possibility.
No, it's part of that oil impact money that we would like to procure.
So you are buying a new plow, for sure? That's in,
We do have a plow budgeted, yes.
okay, and you're going to add the snow gate to that one?
I think we're waiting to see the direction the commission would like us to go with that. I don't know if it pays for us to add that if we're not going to go that direction. If that's the direction the commission would like to see us go with snow gates, we'd certainly pursue that more. We'd probably go visit with Williston, watch the operation. We'd drive to Bismarck and see their operation, see what type of gates they have, because there's several different types.
Yep.
See which ones have been most effective in doing that, to ensure that if we go, we're getting the best product we can out there, not a real maintenance concern that's adding to our fleet.
You know, I know you got a lot of things on your list to do with all that's going on here, but if you could do that, visit Williston and visit Bismarck, I think that would be a good idea, because I have a feeling that Mr. Mr. Altman is probably going to convince at least two of his colleagues that, and maybe all of us, that this should be done. So I think the more information you get and the sooner you get it, I think it would be better. And, you know, if we buy snow gates and then it quits snowing, we're all going to be happy anyway. It's going to be a great investment, so,
If that's all it would take.
yes.
Well, we do have a loader that's in the budget for this year. Certainly, we'll be speccing that with the proper hydraulics to handle things like that if we're looking to go that direction, so we don't end up in a retrofit situation down the road. So
You bet.
we'll certainly take that next step and visit a couple of communities and go on with that.
I agree that we have to be interested enough to chase this down some more.
See, there's already two. Could be more.
Can I assume that we're not hauling all the snow in town, though? Can we push our efforts on maybe snow gates?
I would be in
More.
favor of that, yes.
I would be in favor of snow gates, and then like I just witnessed in this last week, when the snow has died down and the city has time, they do go back and remove snow. But in the interim, we can't keep piling it the way that we have. We've got to do something differently.
And of course, though, you know, we used to have quite a bit of our own land where we could pile some of the snow on, and we've been very fortunate to sell land, but as we sold land, then I think, I'm assuming the university is allowing us to pile snow there, right, directly north of the BAC.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, without that, I'm sure we'd be in a world of hurt in terms of where to put the snow.
We're piling there, and then we also own land by the fire training site on the south side that we're utilizing. We used to have some railroad right-of-way. This year, they've shut us off from piling the snow there, which has created us some hardships, too. So that's becoming a challenge for us as well.
Now, when you were talking about the number of units that we would need as far as snow gates, you were considering that the city would purchase for the independent contractors?
We'll have to work that issue out. You know, I assume whether we purchase it for them or whether, you know, if they're going to purchase them, they're going to want some contract that's going to state they're going to have snow removal for 5 years or something, and then that fee will be figured in there as well. So as long as we're using contractors, we're going to have to figure out a method as to how we're going to handle that, as well as the repairs.
With all the developments taking place, finding contractors is going to be more and more difficult, as well as their equipment and manpower.
It certainly can be challenging. The fortunate part about snow, I guess, is when we have major events, it kind of slow days for them, and they can usually, we haven't had problems getting them to come in and help us. It certainly could become more and more of an issue as we move forward, though.
Commissioner Altmans, are you satisfied with direction so far?
I am. I feel like we're getting closer to a solution. It's nice to have some actual figures to look at. It's one thing to say, let's remove every bit of snow from every street. It's another thing to look at the constraints and the dollar figures associated with it. But it also puts, you know, snow gates in a better perspective, I think, as well. And I think if we hadn't gone down the whole road of looking at all the options, it was pretty easy to say that snow gates won't work and that we don't look at them as an option. I think that our idea of going up to, you know, Williston and Bismarck and seeing them in action and how they're working and getting some quotes and putting some in place, I like that we're moving forward with at least the process.
Well, then, are there any other issues that commissioners have? If not, are there any public issues? Anyone from the public wish to comment? There's no one from the public. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would make that motion.
We have the motion and the second. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.